Hello everyone, welcome to our first webinar of this academic year. I really hope that you are all settling in well to your employing schools. You'll have had a good few weeks there now, and we're really looking forward to taking your questions this evening about all things NQT, so don't hold back. It can be any area of your NQT year that you ask questions this evening. On the panel with me, I have Peter Raymond.
Hello.
And Katie Bloom.
Hello.
And also behind the scenes, we have the wonderful Ian Wilson, who's doing all things techie and making this all work wonderfully this evening. And so we're all looking forward to sharing some advice and some points with you today. So first of all, I just want to clarify a few things that I keep getting emails about. I've had a lot of emails recently about documentation that's been sent to your employing schools over the summer. By now, your NQT mentor should have sat down and you should have shared your CEDP and those documents together. However, I've had some people emailing, even today I've had an email saying we don't seem to have that information in school. If that hasn't been received, it's usually because it's gone to the admin email address at your school, and then sometimes it gets a little bit lost in translation. It doesn't get to the right person in school. So if that documentation hasn't been received yet, please just bob me an email, nqt@yorksj.ac.uk, and we'll make sure that gets out to you ASAP. But I do hope that the majority of you have got that and you've been able to talk through your NQT targets with your mentor. Second thing I just want to talk about, I get a lot of questions about what am I entitled to? What are my entitlements as an NQT? What should I be getting? Now, a document that I want to flag up to all of you, there's actually a link to it on our NQT website. So if you go onto our NQT website and go to the resources section on there, Ian's doing a wonderful job of showing you through this now. So on the resources tab there, and then the top tab that says government induction guidance, within that, we're nearly there. There we go, induction for newly qualified teachers. You can Google this as well, but I just wanted to show you where it was on the website. And that very document there from the DFE, yeah, if you could open that up, that's wonderful. This is your kind of go-to guidance, okay? And this will give you all the kind of legislation and the statutory stuff that needs to be happening. So just to point out a few things to you that's in this guidance, just starting on page 12, which talks about a reduced timetable. So as an NQT, you are entitled to 10% NQT time, and it explains there that is additional to your PPA time. Now that's 10% of your timetable of the time that you are contracted to work in school. So if you're not full-time, it will be 10% of whatever time you are working in school. So that is an entitlement, that's something you should have. And we'll talk perhaps a little bit more later about how you could be using that time, but what I would say is really be making the most of that time, because that's something you're only going to get in your first year. If we just scroll down a little bit, there's information there about registering with an appropriate body. This is something that your school should be doing on your behalf, but again, I have had some questions about this and the involvement of the local authority and so on. So that covers over the next couple of pages. If we can just scroll down into page 16, thank you. Okay, so that talks about length of the induction period, which is also something I've had questions asked about, particularly if you're on a 0.5 or a 0.6 contract. It needs to work out as equivalent to a year that you have worked. So if you work in 0.5, your induction period will go over 2 years to work out at that length. And then just further down on there, appointment of an induction tutor. So this is what we refer to as your NQT mentor. So there should be a named person in school, and it explains there to provide day-to-day monitoring and support and the coordination of assessment as well. So you should have somebody named. It doesn't have to be the head teacher, it doesn't have to be somebody in your year group, but it should be somebody who has QTS and who understands the kind of NQT process as such. And underneath that it talks about observations during your NQT year, that there will be at regular periods, and then formal assessments which will be done termly. So I hope that gets us off to a good start, thank you Ian, in terms of outlining some of those entitlements that you have during your NQT year. So I just want to turn now, and please do start typing in your questions to us live. We'll be really happy to answer those. But I just want to turn now to some of the questions that we've had emailed into us beforehand. And actually the first one is about entitlement, which I've just talked through, and also how much support should we be getting. So I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about support and what you perceive as being support in school. So Katie and Peter, any thoughts on this?
One of the things that occurred to me when you were showing the document about 10% time, what can be useful, there can be a tendency to think I've got 10% time, so on a full-time contract that's half a day a week, to think I'm going to have half a day every week. What can be useful is, and it was certainly something I did as a head teacher, was to allow NQTs to chunk that together sometimes. So that may be a day every 2 weeks, or if there's a really meaty professional development opportunity coming up that might be a residential course, but for 2 days, that could be 4 weeks of professional development time. So try to look at opportunities to use that flexibly. It may be that you can be proactive and actually look for opportunities and go to your mentor and say, there's a course here, there's this coming up, I'd like to go here, there, and actually sort of present a case, if you like. But don't, as I say, don't just look at that in terms of half a day a week. Look for opportunities where that could be chunked up into something more substantial over a longer period of time.
Yeah. And I think it is a good idea to try to be more flexible with the time in school in that way, because at primary you're not as fixed to things being in certain times. At secondary, of course, you're going to be fixed into those slots. So if you are primary, then really do try and make something of flexing that time for yourself.
And I think it's really important to treat that 10% time like gold dust, because it's really expensive to provide it. You'll probably never get it again. It sounds a bit cheesy to say it's a one-off opportunity, but it kind of is a one-off opportunity. So don't spend it sitting doing your marking in the staff room. Look for those real opportunities to do something really substantial in your NQT year while you have the opportunity.
Yeah, please don't get into the habit of just seeing it as extended PPA time, which I have heard some people kind of view it in that way. Use it for your own professional development, and that might not always be in school, it might be outside of school opportunities as well. So just the question asked was, how much support should we be getting? Now, I don't know in terms of what this NQT was thinking about support, or whether you are specifically thinking about support from your mentor. I would expect that at the beginning of the term, that very first meeting that you had or you have with your mentor, that you'll be talking through about how you plan to spend that NQT time coming up. And it won't be that every week your mentor is spending that time with you, but there certainly should be some weeks where they're going over things with you, and when you have chance to ask questions and clarify points and so on. But as it said on that documentation, it's that kind of day-to-day monitoring, somebody who you can go to. But I also think you need to think about support in the broader sense as well across the school. So how other colleagues can support you, particularly in your key stage or year group. Think about people that you can actually go to. Other NQTs, you might get some opportunities for networking with NQTs who work within the same sort of cluster of schools as you, or within the same local authority on courses. NQTs that you know from university as well, thinking about them in terms of support as well. So I think you've got to see this in the much broader sense.
I think one of the difficult things is that there's a natural tendency to want to show how independent and professional you are, And similarly, as when you're on SE3, I think that you need to find a balance between being independent, being proactive, and not continuing in difficulties and not wanting to seek support because fear of appearing weak or incompetent, or that's slightly strong. You naturally, as a qualified teacher, more will be expected of you than on placement. But don't fall into that trap of thinking I can't go and ask about that. I'm a qualified teacher. I should know this. You don't know everything, and you never will. So don't be afraid to seek support, but find that balance between asking too much and not asking enough. And there isn't that's not an exact science. I think compared to placement, your NQT is different. In placement, you have 6-8 weeks to prove yourself. Now you have a much longer period of time. You won't. We would expect to be having lesson observations every week, but just it's finding that spot. And I think something that's good to do as a qualified teacher is to widen that group of people that you might look to. So it might be a mentor, it might be a teacher in a parallel class, it might be a teacher in a completely different part of the school. As Louise said, it might be other NQTs, and build up a support group. But you can also be part of a support group in terms of giving support as well, and don't underestimate your ability to support other people as well as seeking support.
Especially in terms of you going into your NQT year with such a wealth of knowledge from university, there may well be staff in the school who are looking on you to think, well, you have the most up-to-date knowledge of this. So don't be afraid to share that. Yeah. Yes, do it in a appropriate manner, but don't be afraid to share it.
I mean, but part of the reason schools provide placements for student teachers is to get that injection of enthusiasm back into the school. So you could probably have quite a good trade with someone. The thing I would add to what Peter was saying, people will probably be your best resource, and the people that you trained with will continue to be a resource if you stay up with those groups that I'm sure you created when you had your time together. But perhaps use your some of your time to ask to go and observe someone else, just as you got a lot out of observing when you were a new student teacher, so you can still get a lot as an NQT because you've got your eye into things more. So when you were training, you didn't know what you didn't know sometimes, or things just happened and you couldn't see that it was so many different aspects of the teacher's repertoire just really coming together. You're out the other side of that now. So go and watch experienced teachers and pick out those pieces of repertoire and think, right, I like that. I'm going to try that out for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian, have we got a question?
Yes, we do. I haven't secured a specific teaching role yet, but I'm signed on with teaching personnel as a supply teacher. The agency does not supply NQT support. What support could I access? I have to apologise because I've got it in my ears exactly what I'm talking, so it sounds so strange.
An interesting question actually, support when you are doing supply work. I think first thing to say to that person is you are doing absolutely the right thing. In terms of, I assume you are still applying for teaching jobs, but supply work is a fantastic way to get into schools, to build up your knowledge of working in different contexts and with different year groups. So fantastic opportunities for you there. In terms of support, I think it's kind of support in terms of you looking out for yourself, looking for resources, networking with other NQTs, speaking to staff in schools, coming back to us as well. This is why we hold these webinars. This is why we have an NQT website. I don't know what specific support this person is referring to, and perhaps they could get back in touch with us to give us an example of the support that they're looking for, but there's certainly ways and means of finding that out there.
Something occurred to me, and I'm going to look to you as I answer this.
Okay.
We did have the person mentioned a specific agency.
Yeah.
There was an agency that came in and spoke to our students.
There was supported recruitment, yes.
Which is a York-based one, and from memory, and again I'm looking to you, they specifically provided support.
Absolutely, that was their kind of niche. Their sort of
unique selling point. So it may be that if you're looking at supply, or that's what you're doing at the moment, is not restrict yourself to one agency. Perhaps if you get in touch with Louise, she might be able to direct you towards that particular agency. Because I remember them coming in, and one of our you may remember them coming in. One of our former students works with them, and they did have that particular selling point that they provide support to the teachers that they work with, which I think is quite unusual.
Yeah, they have now expanded outside of York as well, and there may well be other supply agencies who offer similar opportunities. So if you are looking for that specific support, they do go in, and how I understand it is they go in and they offer support in the classroom. So they will actually talk you through things or observe lessons in a kind of friendly, supportive manner. So there may be other opportunities for that as well. Certainly if you're getting to the point where you're doing regular supply work in one or two schools, you'll be building up relationships with other staff in there, and you should be able to go to them to kind of ask on a daily basis as well, and certainly senior leadership team in the schools if there's any particular points.
And don't forget, if casual supply leads to a supply contract of at least a term's length, then that starts counting towards your NQT year. So if you do a whole term in one school through a supply agency, you then become entitled to the kind of support that Louise was talking about at the beginning of the webinar.
Okay, so just to follow up on that, thank you for your advice about support for supply teachers. I'm so pleased I can still contact you guys. Also the contact with other NQT teachers, all good advice. I will try and find a supply agency in York. Thanks for the heads up.
Good, yeah, and as I say, if you want to email me for further details, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, as I say, that's why we're here, and one of the reasons we're here this evening to support you. So thank you for your question. Okay, and another one. Have we got any more live at the moment, Ian? No. So another one from my list. Still on the sort of theme of support, but what advice would you give me if maybe I'm not getting as much NQT support from my school as I first hoped? Well, I kind of hope that we've answered that question in terms of thinking about support more broadly. But if you do have specific concerns about your school, and I don't know in terms of this NQT, but perhaps making sure that you have got a named mentor if that isn't in place, and you perhaps aren't meeting with your mentor as regularly as you'd like in these early weeks, just go and have a conversation with them. Go and ask if that would be possible, just with the understanding that they're going to be very busy people as well, but they have taken on that role and they should be supporting you. But I think it's the balance that Peter was talking about earlier as well, and making sure that we're getting that right.
Sorry. No. Something that you might want to think about, and I hope this doesn't sound harsh. The question was not as much NQT support from your school as you first hoped. It may be that you were hoping for more than you should be getting, and I hope that doesn't sound dismissive. I'm not usually a great advocate for sort of the rumour mill, but it might be worth just checking in with your peers and seeing whether your experiences are similar or dissimilar. If you find that generally your peers are getting more support, That's different than if you actually talk to others and you find, well, the support you're getting is fairly typical. So there may be a mismatch between your expectations and what is reasonable and sensible to provide as an NQT. And I hope that doesn't come across as me trying to dismiss the question.
There's a really good follow-up question from that, in the sense that people are saying if they eventually get a teaching post, they feel that they might be behind on the assessment of students because the pupils would have been there a period of time.
Yeah.
What strategies would you suggest to keep that up to date? And it is secondary.
Okay. All eyes on you, Katie.
Can they amplify just a bit more what they meant perhaps by what sort of assessment?
Yeah, it is sort of like they said that I'll be behind working on assessment for the students. It's in geography. So I think it's a sense that the year has started and you're coming in and you don't know where they are. It's not the beginning of the year, etc.
Well, first things first, whenever you take over a class, what you have to do is find out what they've done before. And one of the easiest things to do is speak to the staff that have had those classes. At secondary level, it's not as likely that they're going to move forward as a whole cohort, because depending on the age group, they end up going into different sets. So you get information from previous teachers. You could even have a look at things that they produced before. But when you've got them, it's up to you to do as much in-class assessment as you can. So you need to reconnect with those formative techniques that's going to give you as much information about their starting points as you can. So things like probes. In science, we use things like concept cartoons to sort of set the scene, to open up a concept and then say, what do you think? And I'm sure that there will be similar things in geography as well. So forgive me if I can't talk particularly about your subject. But so many different formative techniques, some that can be done quite instantaneously to sort of take the temperature of the room. You could throw out subject knowledge sort of questions that can be answered by a multiple choice, but the way in which they respond to the A, B, C or D could actually be giving you further information about how deep they know or concepts around that subject knowledge. And so just the number or the letter that they give you tells you where you need to go next with your teaching, and it may be then that you need to flex it because they're not showing you what you thought you would have at this point for them. Could be that they show more and you've got to up your game. But I think that's the first steps, formative techniques.
Something that occurred to me while Katie was talking, and I'm certainly not a secondary expert, but I think it's applicable, whatever. Actually, that situation is almost a bit like school experience. Because when you go on school experience, you don't start in September.
Yeah.
So actually what you did last year was kind of what you're talking about. So it may be that doesn't necessarily have to be as worrying as you might think, because you've done that already. You've come in, you've parachuted into classes mid-year already and made a success of it.
And then the follow on from that is the formative assessment is in the learning instance of the classroom, but you follow it up with work that they do at home, and obviously work that you can then assess over time to get that summative slice. And you keep your records all the time. You keep your own records.
And it just to add to that, it's not uncommon for teachers to be going in partway through the year, maternity covers and so on come up all of the time. So you certainly won't be on your own. You won't be the first person to be going into school, into employment midway through the year. So I hope that helps.
So, well, just some feedback from that. The person said, that's reassuring, Katie. I thought this might be a case. Thank you. Then I can forward any formative assessment results back to the class teacher if she's on supply or anything like that.
Yeah, brilliant.
Brilliant.
Yeah, good. Okay, we'll go to another question from my list, and Ian, we might be looking to your expertise for this one. So the question is, how can I better understand working at greater depth in maths?
Are you coming straight to
We
me?
are, yes, as there's no other maths experts on the panel, we are coming straight to you, if that's okay.
Right, just 1 second.
Poor Ian is trying to juggle so many tasks, and I'm then
was
putting
just-
a question on him at the
I was
same
just
time.
answering something in the chat at the same time. So we'll come to me, and then I have to take my headphones out because otherwise I can hear myself. They're all eating sweets now. Can I just say? I'll go back to them in a second. So what was the question again, Si?
How can I better understand working at greater depth in maths? Well, it actually says maths and English, but we'll let you off with just the maths.
Okay then. So the first thing I would say to you is definitely go across to the NCETM webpage. It's the National Council for the Excellence of Teaching of Mathematics. It's a really good site and it's free. And once you've got a login, you'll be able to go on and it will explain this idea of mastery. The other thing that it has up there is a checklist, an assessment checklist. And that assessment checklist actually demonstrates levels of mastery. And what it'll do is that it's actually progressive as it goes down the bullet points. So the first one will say something like, be able to tell their partner, be able to explain it to somebody else, be able to show it in pictures, be able to do this, that and the other, be able to prove it. And that's a really good sort of like checklist. And what I would be doing is thinking about those 5 areas of mastery: the representation structure, fluency, variance, the coherence right way through it, and the mathematical reasoning. Using those and then using the checklist with it, and sort of like say, right, can they explain more? Show them lots of conceptual variation, so don't sort of like just show them one square or one oblong. Show them in different orientations, show triangles differently, blend them together. Remember those questions, things like what's the same, what's different between these 3D shapes. Also, what is a triangle? What's essential for a triangle? Can you draw a shape that's not a triangle? If you draw a triangle that's not connected, is that a triangle? So you can just sort of like, on those bases of that conceptual variation, you can sort of like expand it a lot more. And talking about, was it English as well?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm coming back to you in a second. So with English, I would really be looking at the use of different words, different adjectives, you know, whether or not they can change a sentence. Can they reorganize the word order? Can they use frontal adverbials? Can they sort of like make it so it has more impact? Can they change a sentence into a headline or a slogan or something like that, and almost like play around with that, so they're demonstrating that they know how to use words and how to manipulate them. Also things like synonyms and antonyms and things, different uses of words as well, I think will be a really good starting point for that. Is that all right?
That's wonderful. I'm not sure that we can follow that at all. I think you've done such a good job of answering that so thoroughly, and we've all finished eating now as well, so we're absolutely fine. Thank you.
Could I just very briefly add, if we connect what Ian's just been saying with previous questions about NQT support, I'm making an assumption that this question has been triggered by an expectation within the school or a way of working within the school. So this is very general, but look at your CPD time. Is there someone in your school who is very successful at working at greater depth in mathematics? Is there another teacher who's very successful at doing that within in English? So use your CPD time. I think irrespective of the age range, go and see how someone else is doing it, and perhaps not just as a one-off, perhaps go once, twice, 3, 4 times and try to make sense of how they're doing it.
And perhaps not even in your school. I'm thinking we often have a lot of NQTs in small village schools, and it might be that you speak to your head teacher and they say, well, yeah, if you go off to this school, you're going to see excellent practice, and there's this particular teacher there who you can speak to, so don't be afraid of getting out as well. Okay. Have we got any other questions live at the moment, Ian?
Yes, we have. I'm just switching around. The question says, what strategies would you use to ensure that you don't take on too much in your NQT year? They feel that people are saying, do this, do that, do that. Do you have any recommendations? They're aware that they should say no, but how to say no while you're still demonstrating that you're keen, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think that there needs to be a balance, because you're right, as an NQT you want to show your willingness, you want to show that you're keen, but at the same time you've got to think about you and your own well-being as well, and saying yes to everything, which is the temptation, particularly at the beginning of the year, won't do you any good in the long run as such. Things like, so a very good example here is clubs. Okay, taking on an after school club. How about for the first term you, well, either not and say maybe from the spring term or the summer term I won't. If you are really keen that you do something, do it jointly with somebody. Or say, well, I see that this club's already up and running, so I'd like to go and shadow so-and-so for this term doing that, and then maybe eventually take over that club, or think of some different ways that I can take that club. So rather than kind of going in whole hog as such, think about ways that, yes, I'm still doing that, but I'm not taking on full responsibility for it myself, but I'm still experiencing that. So that's just kind of one example, but I think a good example, because it's something that is optional, but you want to show you're willing.
I was just going to say exactly the same. I was thinking back to my own NQT year, which was quite a long time ago now. My mentor then was the deputy head. So in my first term, he ran the football team. I joined him running the football team. And this might sound like odd advice, but that was also very visible. My mentor knew exactly what I was doing. Yeah. So if you're going to do something visible.
Yeah.
Or if it's not visible, make sure that somebody knows. Because I think if you're doing something like that, it almost allows you. It's easier to say no because I'm doing that.
Yeah.
And I can remember when the dark nights came in and it was too dark to do football. That's when I did some music. Again, working with somebody else, and then went back to the sport in the summer. But absolutely, that's exactly what my experience was. Work with somebody else whilst you're developing the core part of what you're doing, which is teaching a class.
Yeah, and maybe just that gentle kind of, I will consider whatever it is in the future. However, this term, I want to focus on my class, on the children, really getting to know them, getting to know the policies of the school, the routines and so on. And just remember that everybody who is employed as a teacher at your school has been an NQT at some point. So they should be able to relate to that, and they should be able to understand that actually you aren't going to be doing everything straight away, and you need to look after yourself.
And also, I think, leading on from making it be visible, there's a very nice way you can say, oh, I would love to do it when I have finished doing this. So you make it really clear that you are actually really busy with something right now. And then, so I'd love to be able to work with that with you next term. So you're not saying no, you're not closing it down, you're not saying you're unwilling, but you are letting them know that you have quite a lot on and that you have to prioritise because you have to pass your NQT year.
Yeah, and I think that is what it's about. It's about prioritising what you can handle in your first term.
And your efforts must go into you as well as your children.
Yeah. I in front of us here, each of us has a copy. Katie emailed me a a link earlier in the week, and it was 50 back to school tips for teachers. So it's not necessarily just for NQTs, but anybody going back to school, written over the summer. And I'll actually put a link to this whole document in the next NQT newsletter that I send out, which will come out about October half term time. But I've picked out a number of points on there, and one of them is get yourself ready mentally and physically. Exercise, eat well and rest, then keep it going throughout the year. Probably easier said than done, but there's some really important stuff there. Exercise, eat well and rest. Absolutely. You've got to, thinking back over the last few years, I've been doing some research with some NQTs, and we've been talking a lot about work-life balance and getting that right. And those who are getting it right have got themselves into a routine. So I know that this night of the week I have staff meetings, so I'm going to be in school until that time. I know that another night of the week I'm maybe shadowing or in the summer term doing a club, so that's going to be taking up time. But I'm going to make sure that those other 3 nights, there's at least 2 of them that I get away from school at this particular time. And one really good piece of advice that one of our now RQTs has given is, if you are a member of a gym, or if you're not, join one, but if you are, book in for a class, because if you have a particular time that you've got to get away from school to go to that class, or whatever hobby it might be, it's going to force you to leave at that actual time, rather than just saying, oh, well, I'll do that later. So having something that you know, I need to be away from school at that time, and just keeping that balance going, getting into that routine and keeping it going. They eat well as well. It's looking after yourself. I don't want to sound like a primary teacher by saying that, but it is. So just think about your own well-being. Another question?
Yeah. First thing I would say is, don't forget that you can actually go on the YouTube channel, and that wonderful discussion that Louise was referring to is actually on the video. It's when some NQTs from primary and secondary came in and actually talked about surviving the year. I think that's what it was, which was brilliant. Okay, just a comment rather than anything. I must say that this webinar is really boosting my confidence. Having had a break for a while and awaiting work starting after half term, I was getting a bit nervous. Useful to do this.
Good.
So,
that's really nice to hear. Really nice to hear. Do keep in touch with us. There's the NQT inbox. I look at that every day, and it's really nice to see that it is being used. I am getting more and more NQT emails. The NQT website, keep using that as well. Twitter, keep in touch with us on Twitter. There's lots of ways you can stay in touch, and we are happy to help. For those of you, just on that point, Ian, for those of you who aren't in employment and are seeking employment, I am happy, and I have been looking through some supporting statements recently and kind of giving some advice to people who haven't successfully got to interview stage of how you can get there. So we can support in that respect as well, not just once you're in school as an NQT. So thank you, and we appreciate the feedback as well.
So I've got another question.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's fine.
It's a question that I think comes up a lot, and so a lot of NQTs, especially I think in EYFS, might have issues with this.
Mm-hmm.
The question is about how do you create an effective relationship with a TA or somebody that's supporting that is very set in their ways and think their way is the best way to do it, and what advice would you give there?
I think this one's all about balance as well, and there being a little bit of give and take. You want to show that you are there as the class teacher. You want to show your knowledge that you're bringing from your training. However, you want to have that relationship. TAs are absolutely like gold dust. And you want that relationship to work well and to work for you. So I think certainly at this time, in the first few weeks, first few months, you're just going to have to be trialling different ways of working, and it may be being a combination of, well, I'd like you to try it this way, but also I'm going to take into account some of the things that you're saying to me about what's worked well in the past. So show that you are listening, but also show that actually, well, I've also done this on school experience, I've done this in the past and this has worked, so can we just give this a little bit of a go? I think there needs to be some give and take there, I really do, in order to build up that relationship.
Yeah, and I think it can be very hard because some TAs are hugely experienced.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to recognise that you are the qualified teacher, you are the one who's there, you're the one who's accountable for the class, for the children, for their progress, for their welfare. So I think Louise has hit it bang on the head in terms of that balance. But it is important that you, in the early stages, that you're clear about how it is that you want the class to be taught, whilst recognising their strengths. This might come out wrong, but I think you have to be careful about giving too much ground and sacrificing what you believe. Now, my colleagues might not agree with me, I don't know. It's not being the hard nut, but it is your class. And whilst you recognise people's strengths and experience, you do need to be showing how it is that you want your class to be taught, because they're there to assist you in your teaching. And it's absolutely, Louise is absolutely right. I think it is a balance, but don't sacrifice what you believe to be right and true.
I think I would say talk to them, find out about them, find out what motivates them, find out what motivates them to say that they have the sort of approach that they do, because there could be a lot of merit in it. On the other hand, it could be that they are just stuck in their ways. So it's only by building those bridges with them that you're going to find out more about that. And it could be that there are some real gems in there that you think, gosh, I never came across that before. That's absolutely brilliant. And that's where the real experience can come out. At the other end of the scale, they could be telling you what to do just because they like telling you what to do and pointing out that they have a lot of experience. And that's when, it might have to come down to, well, I've listened to you. We have tried things your way. I appreciate you trying things my way. But as Peter has said, ultimately this is my class and it is my responsibility.
I often think a conversation, actually sitting down and talking to them about it is really the way forward, because it might be that they are as frustrated as you are, and actually sitting down and talking about each other's points of view can be really important. And as Katie said, there might be some absolute strengths in there that haven't been used before, and just from you sitting and listening, you can understand that and then start to use them. You use those strengths.
I have another question.
Super.
It's for you, Katie. It's about secondary.
Okay.
The person says that basically what they're saying is that when a class comes from another lesson into theirs, they're very rowdy because of the difference in behaviour management styles before and after, and they're saying that it's taken a lot of time to get them quiet and ready for learn. Did you have any strategies that you could share that might be effective in this situation?
Okay, so a couple of things to start. It really depends on what the policy is in your school. Some schools, for instance, might insist that their teachers are by the door and speak to each of them as they come in. And at secondary level, it's usually top button, please, and can you do your tie up, and let's get that jacket back on. But it can also be from you, good to see you, you're doing really well. I appreciate you got here as quickly as you can from PE, because that's always a tricky one. And sometimes they come from the other side of the school, and it is just as it is. If the policy is to get them off the corridor as quickly as possible, you pretty much have to probably put up with it being a straggly sort of entry. But there's things that you can do to get them getting on with things straight away. Now, most places will have, say, a bell task for them to be getting on with. I have very mixed feelings about that because I've been in classes where the bell task is just something to keep them occupied. Now, some of the received literature on how you start your lessons says that the first few minutes are really the most important. So it's important in terms of the attitude that they're bringing in, but it's also important in terms of the subject, content or skills of getting on with that as well. So I would say, make your bell tasks something that's meaty, something that's challenging but doable. And in terms of the relationship building, you need to know their names as fast as possible. You need to use them wherever you can. You need to be as kind as possible, but without losing your own ground as a teacher, because the key thing to getting a good learning climate is that they respect you, and you have to earn that. So it's how you interact with them. Students feel the greatest threat when they feel that they cannot trust their teacher. And the ones that act up the most are the ones who do not trust you and who think that they cannot have any sort of relationship with you. So, sorry, this is all starting to sound really touchy-feely, but a teacher that knows his or her class, that knows the name, who takes the trouble to talk to them a little bit about their likes and dislikes, that becomes a different teacher in students' eyes. And they are then willing to do more for you than they might be for others. And yes, there will always be differences within classroom context because we're all different people. We all manage in different ways. But there are a couple of little tricks that you could do, even when they're in the room, so that if you're talking to them from the centre of the room, you've got to have a field of view that's like that. But if you go to the corner of the room, you have a field of view that's like that. And it just means that you can scan. The second thing, leading on from that, is that you need to be seen to be a noticing teacher. So, for example, as a science teacher, I can walk into a lab and I can say, you still got your rucksack on, your safety glasses are on the top of your head, you need to get your long hair tied back, and I see it in a fraction of a second. Mm-hmm. What goes along with that is that they know that I will see. And because they know you're a noticing teacher, they then are less likely to start trying things in the first place, if that makes sense. So you have to scan, but you actually have to be seen to be looking, and you catch their eye, and it's like, yes, I've got my eye on you, and I'm going to come back to you if I need to. Be seen looking. It's a technique called be seen looking. I hope that helps.
That's some really useful advice.
Yeah,
there.
fantastic. So we've got two questions,
Okay.
so they're lining up. Number one, I think this is from the teacher who's doing supply teaching at the
Okay,
moment,
yeah.
and they maybe a question for you, Peter, as a ex-head teacher. She already does a magazine group as a community group, and do you think a school would be prepared to take on a sub for clubs, i.e. a supply teacher to come in and do clubs on the after school? So not somebody who's actually employed there. So she wants to develop a magazine club or group with the children.
I think that's a great idea. I wouldn't be at all surprised if a head teacher was really happy about that if it was free. If you are looking to be paid for that, I think that might be a harder sell. It may be worth looking at doing something like that. I mean, schools are good at taking on things which are good and free.
It would be free.
It would be free. Excellent.
Yeah.
That's what. So in that case, that's something that you enjoy doing. Would be really good for the pupils in the school. You can also see it as a way of actually raising your profile. If it works in one school, maybe it could work in 2 schools, 3 schools, and when supply comes up or jobs come up or something longer term, your name is there. What is really important if you're doing that is that the school knows that you are a teacher, not just a well-meaning citizen who's coming in to support. So there's no good them knowing your name and your face if they don't know you're also a teacher. And I would be really honest with them, and maybe not initially, but once you've established and you've got something going that's really good, have a conversation. If I'm interested in supply, I'm interested in working at the school, so that you pop into the heads when things come up. And I guess what I'm saying is be careful that it doesn't come across that you're doing this in order to get further employment, but it could be a great way of getting further employment.
Yeah. Quite often schools, when they're looking for supply teachers, would prefer to take somebody who they know
Oh yeah.
than just somebody from an agency.
Yeah.
So you know, it is something to bear in mind, absolutely.
It's also a good way of sounding out the school. Sorry, Ian.
We will come back to you, Ian.
Because you go for interview, and you must remember that you are interviewing the school just as much as the school is interviewing you. And if the school doesn't suit you, then you would not be happy there. So it is very much a two-way process, and although I'm sure you want to get a job as much as possible, you need to make sure it's the right job for you, so that you do get that support in your NQT year. I'll shut up now, Ian.
Well, one of the things I was just saying online, they were saying there would be the cost of paper, but I was saying that, you know, a lot of magazines now can be done in blog styles and actually go up onto the website, which actually helps a lot with circulation and also contribution. So it could actually be a completely online magazine that students, children contribute to and that.
Yeah.
We do have another question, and I've already directed them to the previous webinar when we were talking about NQTs surviving the year, because I think it came up in there as well. But do you have any strategies or tips to learn names quickly?
I can tell you what I do, and it works for me. I get them in a seating plan straight away. And all through the first lesson, I'm constantly mentally walking around and saying the names to myself, and I will get them on a task, and I'm looking at their face and I'm looking at where they are, and I try and fix it. And I know when I try to learn them here at university, the next time they come in, they're all at different tables, and that's just how it is. But at least in your classroom, you can have them in one place. Another way of doing it is to if it's a sort of school that has their photographs for records, make a little file and put their name under it, and keep on looking at it. Every child has some sort of feature, or they remind you of someone, some way that you can tag a name onto that memory or that feature that helps you. That's what I do.
Something I did when I was a head teacher and I was attempting to learn 300 names is I got a copy of every class photo in the school, and I wrote their names with arrows round. And that's a bit extreme, but even you probably your class, there'll be a class photo, or take a class photo and just write the names round, and it's just, you know, keep looking at it. I had exactly the same experience as Katie earlier this week. I was teaching a group who I'd never taught before, and I got all their names sorted in about 20 minutes. Came back the next day, they'd all moved places. So I think there is something about, certainly the way my brain works, that associates a name with a place. The other thing, and this might sound a bit weird, that I find useful is, as you're learning names, learn both first name and last name, and for some reason that makes it stick in my head. And it's not just a case of I might have 5 Michaels in the class, but just making that association just seems to work for me.
I'm coming at this from an early years perspective, because in your early years classrooms you aren't likely to have them all seated at tables at the same time. You certainly won't have any kind of seating plan. One thing I used to do during the first week or so, I would go around and take a photograph of each child, but take it of them actually choosing. So if you had a child who was likely to be at the sandpit a lot of the time, the likelihood was I've got a photograph of them in the sandpit. They went on the wall as my self-registration. Ian's laughing at me now. They went on the wall as my self-registration photographs, along with their name labels that they came and velcroed up on a morning. But they were there at the front of the classroom, and doing a photo of them, but also doing an activity that I kind of associated them.
That's a cunning plan, I like that.
Yeah, do you like that?
Yeah. And then the other thing I would do, and it works really well with, say, 7, 8, 9, was to give them each a piece of white card and some colours. Got them to fold it in half, to make a little triangle that would stand up, and they had to put their name on it, but also something that was personal to them, something that they liked doing. So they might draw a football, or they might draw a bike, or they might draw someone running, whatever it was. But it meant that I had their name and they were already telling me something about themselves, and I could see if I could work in interests into things that I was teaching.
Okay, just to finish off, lots of thank yous, all good ideas. Thank you for the advice. I'm glad it's not just me who struggles, which is nice, I thought.
Yeah, we've all done
No,
it.
well, this is it. This is part of the support, isn't it? Hearing about what other people are going through at the moment, about other NQTs, and being able to relate and think, yeah, that's exactly how I feel about that, or that's exactly the situation I'm in. So yeah, I'm really pleased that the webinar's been useful for you this evening. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the questions and those questions that came in beforehand. And do keep emailing in, using the website, using Twitter, and we will keep in contact as well. The next thing that will be coming out to you is the first NQT newsletter of the year. Thank you to the team here. Thank you to Ian doing an absolute marvellous job over there, to Katie and to Peter, and good luck with everything. Good luck with, I suppose half term is in sight for you now, those of you that are in employment, and those of you still seeking employment, good luck with the applications and everything. Keep going, you will find the perfect school for you. So yes, thank you, and good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stream and or the recorded video, a disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this live stream and recorded video are those of the individuals and do not reflect that of the institutions from which they work. Thank you. Under Creative Commons License 4.0, so if you use any part of the show, please give us credit. Thank you.